Can we start? Madam, until what time? Until when? I see. Samanta Chakravartisu Atra Gachantu Devata Saddhammam Munirajasya Sunanto Saddhamokkatham Ammassavanakalo Yang Padanta Dhammasavanakalo Yang Padanta Dhammasavanakalo Yang Padanta Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Atti Mahali Hetu Atti Pacceo Sattanang Sankilesaya Sahetu Sappacchaya Satta Sankilisanti Atti Mahali Hetu Atti Pacceo Sattanang Visuddhya Sahetu Sappacchaya Satta Visuddhanti. Most Venerable President Mahasangha of this temple, dear devotees, Dhamma friends, ladies and gentlemen, on this day following the Vesak full moon day, you all have gathered here from the early morning after observing Ashtanga Sila. Now you all are here to listen to a Dhamma sermon which is scheduled for this time. Before we start our Dhamma sermon today, as a customary practice, I just thought of sharing with you a particular Dhamma advice. We all know the significance of the Vesak full moon day. Why it is important for us. Dhamma friends, a Buddha, a fully enlightened being, comes to this world purely not to direct us how to live in this society, not to direct us on how to start a business or carrying it out successfully, not to direct us how to enjoy ourselves, no. The Buddha comes to this world purely to direct us towards the Nibbana. What is the reason for that? In numerous discourses in the Tripitaka Pali Canon, the Buddha has preached there is only two aspects of this world, nothing else. What is that? The suffering and the cessation of suffering. That is only we have. Although we conventionally call that there are certain things around us, at the ultimate sense, we have only those two aspects, suffering and the cessation of suffering. Therefore, the prime goal of coming to this world by the Buddha is to direct the sentient beings, all the suffering sentient beings towards the Nibbana. I recall a particular stanza preached by Arahant Mahaprajapati Gautami Therani in her Therigatha. The Pali term goes Bahunang Vata Attaya Maya Janai Gautamam Vyadi Marana Tunnanang Dukkha Kandassa Vyapano Heti. What is the meaning of that? Bahunang Vata Attaya, for the benefit of the many. Maya Janai Gautama, the Queen Mahamaya, gave birth to the Gautama Buddha, the aspirant Buddha, the Prince Siddhartha. Vyadi Marana Tunnana, the beings who are suffering in all the diseases and death and every all mass of suffering. Dukkha Kandassa Vyapanoditi. By giving that birth, she removed all the suffering, all mass of suffering from the sentient beings. Simply put, the pain endured by Queen Mahamaya to give birth to the Prince Siddhartha, it is somewhat equal to the pain, the whole mass of pain being experienced by the sentient beings of this universe. So that particular stanza itself, Dhamma friends, reveals us that our whole focus should be towards Nibbana. Having come to that point, now let us turn towards today's Dhamma sermon. Keep in your mind that we are here to learn about the dukkha and also to learn about how to get rid of this dukkha. So for today's Dhamma sermon, Dhamma friends, I have selected a particular Dhamma discourse from the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha, that comes under Kanda Samyutta, the book of aggregates. The very name of the sutta is Mahali Sutta. Remember the name, Mahali Sutta. When the Buddha was dwelling in the Vesak, in the Mahavana, the great forest, at the Utagara Sala, the peak roof terrace, there came a king called Mahali, who belongs to the royal lineage of Lichavi. He came to the Buddha and saluted the Buddha and seated aside. And after that, he raised a very important question from the Buddha. Dhamma friends, this question is not only for Mahali, but also for the entire universe, because that much of significance is embedded in that particular question. Let us see what is that question. King Mahali asked from the Buddha, Venerable Master, there's a teacher called Purukasa, a religious teacher. We know, Dhamma friends, there were 6 main religious teachers in ancient India, contemporaneous to the Buddha. To name some, Purna Kassapa, Ajita Kesa Kambala, Makkali Gosala, Sanjay Velatti Buddha, and Nigantanatha Buddha, and all. So out of that, this Mahali called Buddha, there is a religious teacher, Venerable Master, called Purna Kassapa. He teaches to his followers like this. There's no cause, there's no condition for the defilement of beings. Without a cause and without a condition, beings become defiled. And also he teaches that There's no cause, there's no condition for the purification of beings. Without a cause, without a condition, beings become purified. This is his teaching. Come friends, for this teaching, in Buddhist philosophy, we call it Akiriyavada. In Pali, we call Ahetu Appachayavada. In simple terms, that teaching teaches that for all the things happening around us, be them positive or negative, there's no cause or there's no condition behind them. So he simply said that everything happens without a cause, without a condition. So that was his teaching. So Mahali called Buddha. Venerable Master, this teacher says, for the defilement of beings and also for the purification of beings, there's no cause, there's no condition. What do you think about this, Venerable Master? What is your opinion on this? Where do you stand on this? He asked from the Buddha. Dhamma friends, there was a tendency, there was an inclination in ancient India for all the learned people, all the philosophers, all the kings and all the high class people, when they are about to engage in an important event or important function, they wanted to know beforehand the opinion of the Buddha of that. For an instance, there were great kings, when they were about to wage a war against their enemies, they went to the Buddha and asked from the Buddha, Master, I'm going to wage a war against this person, this king. Will I be successful? Will it be okay? So the Buddha's opinion was very important for them. In the same manner, Mahali wanted to ask the Buddha's opinion about this ahetu appachevada. Then, Dhamma friends, Buddha gave a very important answer. We know in the entirety of the Pali Canon, there are different ways of answering questions by the Buddha. Sometimes the Buddha will give you a straightforward answer. And sometimes the Buddha will give you an indirect answer very briefly, allowing the audience to ponder upon them, to think upon them deeply. And at times the Buddha would counter question the person who asked the question in order to give them better insight. And at times the Buddha would set aside that question, we call in Pali Tapaniya Prashna, because that question itself is not worth answering, because it doesn't lead to any nibbanic value. So, at this juncture, Dhamma friends, the Buddha gave a very straightforward answer to King Mahali. The Buddha said, Mahali, I say, there is a cause, there is a condition for the defilement of beings. There is a cause and there is a condition for the purification of beings. And with a cause and condition, they become purified and they become defiled. So this was Buddha's answer. But King Mahali was not fully satisfied with that, because he was curious enough to know what is the cause, what is the condition of this defilement and purification. So again, King Mahali asked from the Buddha, Venerable Master, you just mentioned that there is a cause, there is a condition for the defilement and the purification of beings. For the first part, may I ask from you, what is the cause and what is the condition for the defilement of beings? Now, Dhamma friends, listen carefully. The Buddha's answer was somewhat simple and at the same time somewhat very deep. The Buddhism as a whole teaches us to see the gravity, see the depth of Dhamma through simplicity. The Buddha at times uses very simple language, but with a deep meaning. So, in the same way, the Buddha answered this question. In answering the question, first, the Buddha understood the question very well. Let me remind you the question. The question was, how beings are defiled with a cause and condition. Who is defiled? Beings are defiled. So in Theravada Buddhism, do we really have something called a being itself? In the ultimate sense, we don't have. So we know that. Even now we know that. These beings are nothing but a conglomeration of 5 aggregates: Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, and Vijnana. The form, the feeling, the perception, the volitional formations, and the consciousness. So taking these 5 aggregates as the base, Buddha answered this question. He took first the Rupa, the form aggregate. The Buddha told King Mahali this way. Mahali, if the Rupa, that means the form, if Rupa were exclusively suffering, if the Rupa were exclusively immersed in suffering, if the Rupa were steeped in suffering, if the form didn't have any element of pleasure, the beings would not enamor with it. The beings would not cling to the Rupa. But because Mahali, the form, the Rupa, is pleasurable, the form is immersed in pleasure, the form is steeped in pleasure, and form is not without any elements of suffering. These beings get cling to it. These beings get enamored to the Rupa. When they get enamored to the Rupa, they become captivated by it. When they become captivated by the Rupa, now they are defiled. Now remember the order, Dhamma friends. In simple terms, the Buddha said, Mahali, since the Rupa aggregate, or the form aggregate, is not exclusively suffering, since it is not immersed or steeped in suffering, since it is not without the element of pleasure, these beings get cling to it. Because the Rupa is of pleasure, is of nature of pleasure. You see, it is immersed in pleasure. It is steeped in pleasure. It is not with only the element of suffering. These beings get enamored of it. Enamored means they cling to it. When they cling to it, they get captivated. When they get captivated, they are defiled. Then Buddha said, Dhamma friends, this is the cause, this is the reason, this is the condition for the defilement of beings. So therefore, Mahali, beings get defiled with a cause and with a condition. Dhamma friends, what do you think about this answer? We are not finished with this. What do you think about this answer? Where does this answer take us to? Now just think about this statement. The first Buddha said about this Rupa is not only with suffering. We know there's an element of suffering in the Rupa, but there's another element, the element of pleasure in this Rupa. So the beings failing to see the suffering of this Rupa, seeing only the pleasure of this Rupa, They first cling to the Rupa. When they are clung to the Rupa, they become captivated. When they become captivated, they are defiled. What is the closest word for clinging or enamored, getting enamored to the Rupa in Pali? What do you think? It is being enamored means being stuck to the Rupa, being stick to the Rupa. That means who sticks things together in our life according to your understanding, according to the Dhamma that you have learned so far. We all have heard about Tanha, the craving. The craving keeps things together. He is the person who sticks things together. We have heard in this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Tatra Tatra Vinandini. It sticks here and there, everywhere. This Tanha is at times, the Buddha compared Tanha to a stitcher. Sibbani Majjaga was Paline. He stitched things together. She stitched things together. Tanha. At times we have heard this word. There is a synonym for the tanha in Pali, bhavanetti. If you have heard, bhavanetti. Bhava is becoming, netti is a projection, a protuberance of something. We cannot join two walls if the first wall didn't have a projection. For the wall of bhava, there is a projection to which we call tanha. So this tanha joins the first bhava to the next. So it is called bhavanetti. So, Dhamma friends, the Buddha says, when you can't see the suffering of the Rupa, when you see only the pleasure of the Rupa, you cling to it. That is tanha. Now we are on the path of paticca samuppada. Think about paticca samuppada. What comes next? Tanha pacca upadana. So for the word upadana, the Buddha uses here. When you become cling to the Rupa, you are captivated. The word itself, captivated, shows us the upadana. When you are done with upadana, what happens? Upadana pacca bhavo. Bhava means becoming. When you become bhava pacca jati, jati is the birth. When you are born, so you are surely you are to experience all the suffering which follows that. Jati pacca jara marana so parideva dukkha dovanas. Birth, decay, disease, death, lamentation, grief, despair, everything follows. So, wasn't it a correct statement by the Buddha Dhammas when he says, when you cling to the Rupa, you are captivated. When you are captivated, you are defiled with all these elements of suffering. So, this is the very truth, this is the very ground the Buddha showed us in this Sutta Dhammas. So, having heard that, Mahali was happy. And also, the Buddha, in this particular sutta, describe all the other aggregates Vedana, Sanya, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, and Vijnana in the same manner. And the Mahali was delighted. He said, Venerable Master, you explained it beautifully. You explained it very correctly. It's very clear for me. But, Venerable Master, there's another aspect of this question. At the very inception of this discussion, you mentioned that there is a cause and there is a condition for the purification of beings. Now I am asking from you, what is the cause and what is the condition for the purification of beings? Then Buddha, Dhamma friends, used the same manner use the same example, but using the other part of the coin. What did he say? The Buddha told King Mahali, if the rupa or if the form is exclusively pleasurable, if it is exclusively immersed in pleasure, if it is steeped in pleasure, if the rupa didn't have any element of suffering, these beings would not become reviled by it. These beings would not experience revulsion towards it. The Buddha said, since or because Mahali, this rupa or the form element is suffering, since it is immersed in suffering, since it is steeped in suffering, since it is steeped not only in pleasure, these beings experience revulsion towards it. Being experienced this revulsion, they become dispassionate towards it. Experiencing this dispassion, they become purified, the Buddha said. Now remember the order, Dhammaphens. First, they understand this rupa element is not all about pleasure. It has a very big deal of suffering. Understanding this nature, some people, some beings experience a revulsion towards the rupa. When they experience this revulsion, they become dispassionate. When they become dispassionate, they are purified. This is the reason, Buddha said, this is the reason, this is the cause, and this is the condition for the purification of beings, Mahali. So that is why I mentioned beings are purified with a cause and with a condition. So, Dhamma friends, the Buddha used all the other four aggregates also in the same manner to describe this particular Dhamma fact to King Mahali. So, King Mahali was very pleased. He expressed his happiness towards the Buddha. Now, the content of this discourse is done, is finished, Dhamma friends. But we are not finished with it. Now we are left to understand what is the application of this discourse towards our day-to-day life. What do you think, Dhamma friends? How can we apply the teaching the Buddha taught us in this discourse towards our day-to-day life? Now, for a moment, think about your life from the very day of your birth hitherto. All the grief, all the lamentation, all the despair, all the pain that you have to endure throughout your life unto this moment. Maybe because of a person, maybe because of a particular object. What was the root cause? The root cause was because you had an attachment to them. For an example, most of you being parents, surely you must have endured some pain, some lamentation because of your children. When you experience this lamentation or grief, the deeper the attachment you have with them, the deeper the suffering you experience, isn't it? It is. And take the other part of the coin. From the very day of your birth hitherto until this moment, all the pleasurable experiences you could undergo, you could experience, all happiness, all the joy that you could experience at times, because of any person or any particular physical object. What was the root cause? There always have been an element of detachment. For an example, When you give away one of your child in a marriage to another family successfully without any problem, didn't you feel some relief? Yes, we did. And when we end a particular very painful headache, when we give it up, when we free from it, when we get free from it, didn't you feel any relief? Yes, we did. So, Dhamma friends, throughout our life, whenever we experience a detachment, a separation, an isolation, a solitude, we experience happiness. Whenever we experience some attachment, clinging to something, holding something tight, we always had to experience some pain. So this is the ultimate truth. The Buddha told us, the Buddha expounded us in this particular Dhamma sermon. So, Dhamma friends, our prime goal of this life, be it a lay person, be it a clergy, it is fair to all. We are to understand this suffering and to get rid of this suffering. So our ultimate goal should be, Dhamma friends, what is that? The Nibbana. There's a very famous quote from the Buddha of the Nibbana. Etang santang, etang panitang, yadidham, sabba sankhara samato, sabbhovati patinissako, tanhakkayo, virago, nirodho, nibbana. In English, this is peaceful, this is excellent, namely the stilling of all preparations, the relinquishment of all assets, the destruction of craving, detachment, cessation, and extinction. So, this is the Buddha's very words, the verbatim teaching of the Buddha. The way he expressed the Nibbana, this is peaceful, this is excellent. Etang santang, etang panitang. Sabba sankhara samato, the stilling of all preparations. Sabbhovati patinissabbo, the relinquishment of all assets. Remember the word, relinquishment of all assets. There indicates the detachments. Upadi are the five sensuous objects. When we get relinquished of them, there is a relief, there is a calmness. The destruction of craving, tanha Thero. Virago is the detachment. Nirodho is the cessation. Extinction is the Nibbana. So now we know where to go. But what we don't know is how to go. But we are in the process of learning that particular method, the way, and we are in our journey towards the Nibbana. Dhamma friends, since we don't have much time to end this Dhamma discussion, let me tell you a very interesting small stanza and finish this Dhamma sermon. In the Jataka Pali of the Kuddaka Nikaya, the Buddha says this statement. I'll tell you the English meaning because I can't remember the Pali stanza right now. Listen to these simple words and get the depth of it. Time eats all beings along with itself. The one who eats time cooks the cookers of beings. Did you get the meaning? Let me repeat slowly but meaningfully. Time eats all beings. Time eats all beings means time destroys everyone. Not only everyone, along with itself. The time eats itself also. Time eats all beings along with itself. But there emerges a person, there arises a person. The one who eats time, the one who eats time, cooks the cookers of beings. we all as a whole are being cooked by a cooker. Who is that cooker? Is nothing but the Mara. When you can eat time, when you can finish the concept of time, where especially when we are in Nibbana. Nibbana has no time. Nibbana is the only condition where there is no conditioning. That is why we call it unconditionality. So when we can experience the very moment where we can eat time, then we are getting the revenge of this cooker. Who is this cooker? The Mara, the death. Now we are cooking the cooker. Remember this element, remember this stanza. Time eats all beings along with itself. But the one who eats time cooks the cookers of beings. These are the very words of the aspirant Buddha, the Bodhisattva. Although it is in simple terms, it has a depth of meaning. So with that, friends, now we have come to the conclusion of this Dhamma discussion. Now let's have a flashback. What did the Buddha teach us in this sermon? Especially, he told us beings become defiled with a reason, with a condition, with a cause. Beings become purified with a cause and with a condition. Our duty is to understand what is this cause and what is this condition. Then we can choose our own path towards the purification or towards the defilement. We all know that we are on the path of purification, the Visuddhi Marga. We are on that. We are to trot that path. So, with that, friends, let's recall the entirety of the Buddha, entirety of the Buddhism teaches us how to understand the suffering and how to end the suffering. When somebody asks from you, whenever somebody asks from you, what is Buddhism? What should be your answer? Give it with a one word. Buddhism is nothing but Nibbana. When somebody asks from you, then what is Nibbana? What should be your answer? Nibbana is Buddhism. So Buddhism is all about reaching the Nibbana, the unconditional. So with that, let me conclude this Dhamma discussion, the Dhamma sermon for today, Dhamma friends. So from the very inception of the discussion, you kept listening to the Dhamma sermon very enthusiastically, very energetically, with full of faith, and with all the merits that you have accrued from the very inception to this moment. Let us transfer all these merits first to the all divinity, all the celestial beings of the entire universe. May they rejoice in this kusala. May they rejoice in this punya. May they attain the ultimate nibbana element. And also let us transfer all the merits and all the skillful deeds that we have accrued by listening to this Dhamma sermon to all our departed relatives, our departed parents, our departed brothers and sisters, and all the relatives, all the companions, and all the friends of all. And above all the soldiers who have sacrificed their life, limb, and liberty to the territorial integrity of this country. May they rejoice in these skillful deeds. May they rejoice in this punya. And may they attain the longevity and the good health if they are alive. And if they are dead and gone, may they rejoice in this punya, in these skillful deeds, may they attain the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. And at the end, let us rejoice in this all the skillful deeds ourselves. Let us make this world fruitful and of use. Let us make our next birth something fruitful. And at the end, let us rejoice in this punya and let us attain the bliss of Nibbana over above all. So with that, I'll conclude this Dhamma sermon. May all be free from sorrow and pain. Akasattha ca bhummattha devānagar nittika punyantang anumoditva chiram rakkhantu sāsanam. Akasattha ca bhummattha devānagar nittika punyantang anumoditva chiram rakkhantu desanam. Akasattha ca bhummattha devānagar nittika punyantang anumoditva chiram rakkhantu tvam sada. Abhivadana silissa niccam pattha pacārino cattaro dhamma vardhanti ayuvanno sukham balam ayurārogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevaca ato nibbāna sampatti iminate samcita. May all beings be free from sorrow and pain.